Okay, there you
Okay. We're on
okay.
Zoom, so
It's all yours, Dr. Beverly.
okay.
Hello. Thank you, audience, for being here. Thank you, Elizabeth and Elton, for this conference and opportunity to present my latest novel, The Tale of a Transplanted Heart. Sorry, I'm not quite sure how the camera works.
Yeah, it's good.
And my name is Beverly Hurwitz. I'm a retired physician. I've spent the last 10 years writing novels to kind of explain some of the experiences I've had as a physician. And this particular book, The Tale of a Transplanted Heart, is the story of a brilliant researcher who's trying to find cures for viral disease when he himself is knocked down by the COVID virus and winds up with heart failure. But then his life is saved by an organ transplant. However, after the transplant, there are some very unexpected changes in the way this man behaves. And because he has the capacity to genetically alter extremely lethal germs, those closely associated with him start to fear that the heart of an angry donor has turned this scientist into a bioterrorist. The story kind of comes from a personal experience I had as a practicing physician about 25 years ago. I was watching a life fade away while an individual languished on a waiting list because donor organs are so hard to come by. But ultimately, after years of this agony, this person's life was saved. However, after the transplant, there were very unexpected changes in this person's personality traits. And at the time, those changes were being blamed on the medications that organ recipients have to take for the rest of their life to present to prevent their immune systems from attacking the foreign cells that have been put into their body. So these anti-rejection drugs like cyclosporin have a pretty nasty side effect profile. Mood swings are just one of the many things that these drugs might cause. And so for the last few decades, there have always been stories floating around about people who took on their donors' characteristics, but it was always blamed on their medication. As it turns out, in the last 25 years, transplant medicine has mushroomed. We do almost 50,000 organ transplants in this country annually. Globally, about 150,000 people receive organs from donors. It would be many more if there were more donors. And just around the time I decided to do this book, a study came out from Colorado where some professors surveyed organ recipients. 89% of people whose lives were saved by a donated organ reported experiencing alien emotions, memories that were not their own, and changes in their personality traits. And some of these, most common change is different tastes in food, but it can also be changes in their preferences for music and art and maybe even the people that they choose to be associated with. Some people have reported changes in their gender identity, some in their sexual preferences. Some have become religious, some have taken on new activities. There was one story of a child with heart disease who received a donor heart and started to want to play with Power Rangers, which he had never played with before, but that's what the donor liked to play with. Another story of somebody who received the heart from a drowning victim, became afraid of water. And so there's now an awful lot of verification that this is not just the side effects of the medication. This is shaking up a lot of our ethical and legal understanding and definitions of what is death and what is life. And this is not just happening in heart recipients, it's happening to people who get new livers and people who get new kidneys, and we don't really understand it. The concept is being called cellular memory. And the best example I can give you of how cells remember goes back to the immune system. If you're old enough to have had natural measles, the measles vaccine came out in 1963. So if you've been vaccinated against measles, your immune cells remember that virus. And if that virus tries to attack you today, your immune cells will immediately recognize it and they will mobilize an army of antibodies to neutralize that virus so it can't make you sick. The other example of cellular memory that the cells can remember comes from transplant medicine. We take an organ from a deceased person, and the heart remembers how to pump, and the kidneys remember how to filter. So there is such a thing as cellular memory, and it says that not all of our traits come from our brain. Perhaps a lot of our traits are in the DNA of all of our cells. The second theme that runs through this novel addresses the issue of who in the world is playing with dangerous germs. And around the time I started to put this book together, there was an incident in Northern California in a small agrarian community called Reedley, where a municipal worker happened to notice a garden hose sticking out of the back of an old abandoned warehouse. What was found in that warehouse were foreign national workers selling phony COVID tests, selling phony pregnancy tests. The building was full of samples of unlabeled germs as well as highly lethal germs. There was an entire freezer labeled Ebola with a lot of unlabeled samples in it. Ebola is a virus, it's 90% lethal. If that escaped from the lab, it would kill most everybody. There were hundreds of sick and dead animals. You can go online today, type in illegal lab, Reedley, California, and you can see all the pictures of what was discovered in this illegal lab. It was owned by a foreign national who was a criminal fugitive in another country. The question is, if we found one illegal lab playing with lethal germs, how many are out there that we don't know about? How many are tucked away in warehouses and basements with mad scientists who are trying to find the germ by which they can control the whole population, which is what happened when COVID, wherever it came from, escaped from the lab or came from natural sources. That's the germ by which you can rule the whole world. So that the book really pulls the curtain back on what's happening in infectious disease research. And there's a third theme that runs through this book, and it's one that runs through a lot of my books, and it's about the business takeover of healthcare. And this has been going on for decades. There are states now where half the hospitals are owned by corporations, and you get struggling rural hospitals who are financially unable to maintain their services, and they get bought by corporations. And if they can't be profitable, they get closed down. Maybe they don't get closed down, but all the unprofitable services will get closed down. The first thing that goes is psychiatry. The next thing that goes is pediatrics. There's no money to be made on your pediatric illnesses or your obstetric illnesses. You know, they kind of keep the orthopedic and cardiac services because a lot of money can be made on those. And so this has been happening to hospitals, but during the pandemic, this is what happened to private practices. Patients couldn't go and see their doctors during the pandemic, so doctors couldn't pay their staff, couldn't pay their bills. 90% of private practices may have been sold to corporations during the pandemic. And so doctors no longer work for their patients. They work for the investors that support these corporations, and it is happening right before our eyes. I read about hospital closures every day, and I suspect that in a very short time, unless some wealthy investor can profit on your injury or your illness, you may not be able to access appropriate health care. This is a book you can find on Amazon. It's available in paperback and Kindle, and it's also available on Barnes and Noble. And it is written as a medical mystery, kind of a whodunit. And I thank you very much for allowing me to bring this book and these issues to the attention of your audience. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. I appreciate your presence here. You quote some amazing conditions. You said 80,000 oh no, 50,000 organ transplants take place every year. And
In the United States.
in the United States. Okay. All right. Very good. Wow. That's an amazing, wow. And so it's your theory, according to your book, that there are some also secondary concerns that we need to be aware of when we're talking about transplantations, whatever, alien emotions, gender identity questions, man. And but overall, you tend to say that if the heart, which was transplanted, still continues to pump blood, and that's the primary focus that it's designed to do, I suppose. So none of those secondary issues become a issue. Is that right?
Um, I can't say that that's a generalization. This is a book from 1997 written by a woman who was her life was saved by a heart and lung transplant. And if you read the stories of these individuals, the impact of the donor on their lives can be considerable. Now, the impact of having a failing organ is considerable, and then being on all these drugs makes life difficult for all these people. And yet, right now, there's over 100,000 dying people in the United States who are on waiting lists for organs. There's just not enough donors to save their lives.
Yeah,
So, having your life saved is a marvelous thing, but then finding you have alien memories of being drowned or
yeah,
murdered.
yeah.
That's not something we can take lightly.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I have 1,000 more questions, but pardon me if I just jump in, and I do. And let's just move through the case of people presenting. And the next speaker, and pardon me if I do that, but if you'll stay on, I promise to try to make time and squeeze time in for more questions for you. Don, you're next. You have